All right, so let's get into it. I'm Eric Diaz, protocol strategist at Blockworks, and who do we have the pleasure of speaking today?
My name is Robinson Burkey. I'm the co-founder of the Wormhole Foundation.
And I'm Jack McDonald. I head the stablecoin initiative at Ripple.
Amazing. So let's start with the big picture. You've been working on a new integration with the cross-chain capabilities of XRPL and the XRPL EVM sidechain. Can you tell us more about what brought Ripple and Wormhole together and what this collaboration is aiming to unlock?
Yeah, I gotta measure how close I am here. I think what's exciting about what we just kind of announced today is that everyone's very familiar with Ripple and the success around Ripple and obviously the XRPL ecosystem. But now it's kind of getting to this critical point, and we were talking earlier about kind of this XRPL or Ripple ecosystem renaissance, right? You have this blockchain ecosystem, so the EVM sidechain now, you have XRPL, and it's largely been separated from the rest of crypto, right? We're probably all familiar with active chains like Solana, Ethereum, Sui, et cetera, and there hasn't been any connectivity to date. And I think what's exciting about now is, Ripple has been around for so long. Now is really that time where Ripple's going to be connected to these other blockchains. So you're going to start to see activity flowing between EVM sidechain, XRPL, and all these other blockchains that we probably know and use today. And so I think that in and of itself for XRPL and for Ripple, the ecosystem is exciting, and for us as well. And when we were kind of working on this, one thing that's really, really important is the Ripple ecosystem, XRPL, is obviously well known, and so it's important to make sure that the connectivity to these blockchains is super secure. And so with Wormhole, we focus a lot on security in particular, work with a lot of institutions, and are going to bring that kind of same focus to what we're doing today.
And I would also just add that both, within the XRPL ecosystem, there's a desire to be multi-chain. We follow utility. We look at what our customers are looking to do and where they want to go. And so there's I think a native desire to expand the optionality for our customers, or I should say for the XRPL ecosystem, users, builders, et cetera. Within Ripple, where I sit, we also see the benefits of a multi-chain world, and even specifically within RLUSD, the stablecoin. While we've launched on both the XRP ledger and Ethereum natively to start, we're 6 months old. We do view the opportunity set expanding in the years ahead and looking for partners to do that with. We're not going to do everything on our own, and when you think about interoperability platforms like Wormhole, we think that there's a lot of opportunities to help bridge that divide, bring us to other chains, and doing that in a very secure and compliant and efficient way. And so we're really excited about where this partnership that we announced today can take the business in the years ahead.
Amazing. So, launching and managing assets across chains is complex. So what does it actually take technically, operationally, and strategically to launch and manage assets across multiple chains? And what's your experience managing this for RLUSD across XRPL and Ethereum?
Maybe I'll start more broadly and let Jack talk specific to...
We have a lot of acronyms there, so you're getting them right.
Yeah. And I'll let Jack talk specifically to RLUSD, but I like to think about, or maybe I would take this question as thinking about the history of assets moving between chains. I'm just assuming that some folks in the audience have used, DeFi or something on chain in the past couple of years or recently. But we kind of came from, if you think about, especially when Wormhole first started, the idea that everything would be multi-chain was not the main school of thought. When we first started Wormhole, it was like a massive bet that there would actually be demand for more than one chain. We actually got a lot of flack for this thought that there would be many, many chains. Then the next evolution of that thinking was kind of, okay, maybe there's a lot of chains, but all those chains are actually just going to settle to Ethereum. So you're just going to have a lot of L2s. All of it will settle to Ethereum. It's the world's computer. Everything else is not needed. And then we finally kind of come to what I would call today, and we all agree that there's going to be a lot of chains in a lot of different forms, and we need something to kind of connect those. And all these chains have a lot of assets. They need to flow between the chains. And so if you think about through that like 5-year history, through all those different eras, what the experience looked like was pretty bad, right? So all these chains are these like blockchains are these silos, if you will. The assets exist only on those chains, and if you want to get them to another chain, you use an interoperability protocol. But what happened at the time was all these different bridges were sending stable coins and assets to every chain and creating multiple versions. So maybe I'll give you like a visual of what this would look like, and some of you probably experience this, and you can probably experience it in some ecosystems today still. You open your wallet and you have 4 different versions. You're on one chain, and you have 4 different versions of USDC. None of those USDCs can be used together. That is what like this, probably I would say the multi-chain asset world looked like maybe a year ago. And some ecosystems still looks like today. And maybe if we were to not use a crypto analogy, you could think about it like open your Chase app or your Bank of America, whatever you have, and you have USD, but they're almost like different accounts that aren't fungible with each other. That was the kind of the interoperability asset world that we've been used to for the past, I would say, like 3 years, as long as multi-chain has been a thing. But now we've gotten way smarter about how to move all these assets between different chains, and we can talk about that here in a little bit. But this kind of brings us today with what does it look like for a stable coin that's newer? USDC has been around for a while. What does it look like for a stable coin that maybe is more new, like RLUSD, for instance, to have a fresh start at making sure there's one native version across any chain it goes to? And I think we're at that stage today, which is exciting.
What is USDC? Never heard of it. From an operational standpoint, as an issuer, there are layers of complexity. And so we think very deliberately about where we're going to expand other chains. I would say there's a whole work stream around trying to determine where the utility is. Again, our business from day one and really across the board at Ripple is really an institutional use case sort of business. So we're looking for institutional utility wherever we travel. But as an issuer of a stablecoin, we have to really understand the different chains that we go to, not only keep track of them, but there are just nuances to it. And there's a lot of expertise involved in that issuance process, in the security and in the regulatory compliance components of it, which is why we would want to partner with the Wormhole of the world to help really bring that to fruition in a very efficient way. We also, as a regulated stablecoin issuer, our regulators, the New York Department of Financial Services, very deliberate about the chains that we go on. And so for us, every chain that we want to issue on, we have to get approved by DFS. Had we not had a trust company license and done this out of money transmitter licenses, there's a lot less rigor around the scrutiny and the approval process that you need to go through. So very involved from an operational standpoint, very involved from a regulatory standpoint. The other thing that we care deeply about is issuing natively on these other chains. We don't want to do it in a derivative or a wrapped sort of product. And so there's a lot of control that ultimately we have. We're basically placing a version of our issuer, our stablecoin issuer, on that chain. And ultimately it's our issuer that we would control and the ability to freeze and claw back if we ever wanted to do that. How we would work with Wormhole to do that is, the sort of exciting opportunities that we're exploring together, because I think it opens up a much broader range of utility and use cases and can get us there in a much more, I think, expeditious and compliant way. But we think about, different lenses, and as part of what the partnership, I think, will bring to us, that there are other, different areas that we have expertise in, that we are each incentivized, if you will, to really focus on what we do best and then rely on the other for those other areas.
Amazing. So interoperability is the core pillar of all of this. What do you guys think is still missing in the ecosystem to make multi-chain stablecoins like truly enterprise ready, and how are you addressing those things?
I would say, and I would say this a lot of things in crypto when you ask about adoption. I still think there's just some basic education that needs to happen at the user level, at the regulatory level, et cetera, and really to distilling out what the differences are between different chains. I think there's also a greater understanding that needs to evolve around the utility, because I think the industry is searching for real world use cases. And this whole idea that we're talking about today around interoperability and multi-chain is not a scary concept. It's actually something that we should all embrace. And I think as an industry, we're a bunch of builders and are trying to build towards that. I was actually speaking with David Schwartz earlier, about this topic. And he said we're many, many, many years away from any one chain being able to claim dominance, whether you're a XRP max, you're a Bitcoin max, you're a fill in the blank. But there's just still so much opportunity to grow, and that we should be cheering each other on and each growing. And I think what Robinson, you and your segment of the industry are doing, I think is very helpful in terms of opening more doors, more opportunities for wide-scale adoption. And so I think it's education. I think it's infrastructure, enabling that to happen, where you preserve liquidity, preserve utility, and preserve regulatory compliance, security. Each one of those buckets, I think, have more opportunity to advance.
Yeah, and maybe I'll think about this just a little bit more technically. I would say we're there in terms of enterprise adoption, and I sometimes view Wormhole, think of us as like a multi-chain asset issuer. So thinking about how we work with institutions today, institutions, in 2021, 2022, we kind of had the meme, institutions are coming. You could argue that FTX kind of set us back a few years, but they're absolutely here. So we are responsible for flows, for instance, of BUIDL, BlackRock's flagship money market fund, Apollo's private credit fund, ACRED. We manage all those flows between chains when you want to send them between chains. And I think if the technology wasn't to a point where they felt it was secure and safe enough, they wouldn't do that. And if we use some of the examples of that I gave about kind of the 4 or 5 year history we've been through with asset movement between chains, a lot of the asset movement prior was what I would call protocol or bridge-owned assets. So it's a lot of lock-and-mint bridges, and I'll be the first to say Wormhole was responsible also for liquidity fragmentation. That was just what we did back then. It was always hard to know the second, third order effects of things, but all the bridges did this, right? Effectively, if you are a bridge and you bridge something to another chain, you are in essence an asset issuer. So if you're bridging any sort of ETH, any sort of stable coin, you will have multiple versions because the bridge owns the asset. So the main difference where we're at today is with all these multi-chain asset frameworks, we go from bridge-owned or protocol-owned to asset issuer, developer, user, whatever acronym, meaning like they own the contracts, not the bridges, who's ever issuing that asset. So that could be a custodian, it could be someone in the XRPL ecosystem, et cetera. But because of that, you own upgrade authority. So it's future-proof, meaning like, and my team will probably kill me for saying this, but like, let's say a big stablecoin or a big institution wanted to use our multi-chain asset issuance platform, NTT, they could upgrade the contract and remove Wormhole messaging if they wanted to, right? So that to me is future-proof, meaning like, if something happened to Wormhole, if something happened to their validator network they use to share state between chains, they can upgrade it, remove it, put something else in and move on. They can also set rate limits, right? You can monitor set flows. We only want 5 million to go between chains every 24 hours. I think BlackRock does this today, for instance. And so what this does is you only have one native version across all these chains. So we went from like looking at 5 in our wallet to 1. The supply remains fixed. The user's happy. You can have deep liquidity on any DEX, because if I'm a DEX on Solana or XRPL or any chain, which version of an asset do I choose, right? Do I choose this flavor of stablecoin, this one or this one? Now they don't have to decide. So I guess my argument would be I think we're there. And we're gonna start seeing it more with more stablecoins, more institutions, et cetera.
I just want to double tap on something Robinson talked about, because it's a big use case for us when we think about capital markets and financial institutions. So there is some specialization that happens depending upon who the end client or the user groups are. And so specifically within capital markets, the work that these guys are doing with the BlackRocks, the VanEck of the world, those are some of the same clients that we are targeting, the same sort of use cases that institutions are looking for: heavily regulated, well-funded, transparent, in our case, stablecoin issuers, but also really judged by the company you keep. So who are the custodians you use? Who are the auditors you use? Who are the the bridging partners or the interoperable partners? And is there a specialization in that offering that really speaks to the needs of those particular users? And saying nothing against meme coins, that's a different audience than a tokenized money market fund like a BUIDL or a Benji, and how stable coins would interact with those products. While at one level, they're similar, there are different requirements that the end users are going to have. And so finding infrastructure that can support those use cases is really important.
Definitely. So, given that you're saying that we are enterprise ready at the moment, stable coins landscape is starting to get a little crowded. You're starting to see a lot of competitors come to the market. How do you view RLUSD's role in this environment? And more generally, do stable coins need a multi-chain strategy?
I'll take the second question first. I do think having a multi-chain strategy is critical to stablecoins, right? We're building stablecoins for the future widespread adoption by institutions, and I think the use cases that are obvious today around global payments, for example, around capital markets, et cetera, are only going to expand. And because chains tend to have biases to them or are built for certain purposes, just like the XRP ledger, really purpose-built for payments and tokenization. There are other chains that do other things, right? And so we want to have a stable coin that can serve the needs of different users, whether they're on one chain or another. In terms of the stable coin business more broadly, clearly it's a competitive space. There are stable coins that feels like being issued every day. I go back to utility and I look at the stable coin landscape, and different stable coins are targeted really to service different end users. There could be, there's a lot of talk about banks issuing stable coins. I think of those as really serving an interbank sort of ecosystem where you could be a settlement token within Citigroup, for example, and even a PayPal, focusing on their payments network. There are other stable coins like ours that have a little bit of a broader remit. And so I think that there will be more stable coins to come, and some will be specialized in terms of their use case. Others will be more broad, but what they do take advantage of is the underlying technology, which really become programmable money that are more efficient to move, that are more, if they're, particularly if they're regulated, et cetera, can be more transparent and have certain advantages. And so we invite more competition. We think it's going to be good for the industry. It's going to open up more use cases, but there are a lot of differences within the stablecoin issuers.
Yeah, and maybe I'll take the multi-chain question with stablecoins as well as just any token. If we think about the top 100 of CoinGecko, CoinMarketCap, I'd venture to say the large majority, there is another version of that token that exists on another chain. So the demand, or at least there is some demand for these tokens to exist on other chains today. And I oftentimes think about the role of an asset issuer. They're running a business in a way, right? They want as much issuance as possible. And if you look at the concept of on-chain too, I think is interesting. A lot of people will say on-chain, maybe they're talking about their blockchain. We like to think about on-chain, and institutions think about on-chain as all the chains. And so if you're an asset issuer, your goal should be as large of a total addressable market as possible. So you want as many investors, or users we would call them, but investors across all these different chains to be holding your stablecoin. You want it to be in DeFi applications on other chains that maybe not are on your native chain or the chain you're currently on. So the question is, for me, it's a TAM question, right? It's like if you're running a business, you want the biggest opportunity for people to buy or use or integrate your product as possible, and that's why multi-chain I think is more or less de facto now. And maybe I'll use one more example: is asset issuers are one thing, but we also have other protocols that will use us in the same way as well. I don't know if folks know what Pyth is, but Pyth is probably like the second largest oracle in DeFi. Their entire protocol is built on Wormhole. So they forked Solana. They have institutions that broadcast price feeds to their chain called PythNet. And then Wormhole sends their price feeds. We do, I think, a couple 100,000+ messages a day, price feeds a day, to all these different chains. I think it's over 60. And we just did the same thing with Redstone, for instance. And what these companies, we call them protocols, these companies are doing is that they're expanding their TAM, they're expanding their product. Now Pyth, now Redstone can go and sell, for instance, Redstone went to Solana. They can go sell a money market, try to get a price feed with Camino. Pyth, they started on Solana, so they can go try to go to Euler or maybe an XRPL money market. And so multi-chain, do these assets need to be multi-chain? I pretty much say you're shooting yourself in the foot if they're not.
Makes a lot of sense. Speaking back to the evolution of the kind of bridge infrastructure, you guys play a big role in that, of course. And how do you guys support native issuance on these chains, and as well as governance? And why is that important specifically for stablecoins?
Yeah, I'll try to be brief with this one. A lot of people use the term bridge when describing Wormhole. It's not wrong. I just think it's pretty outdated. Wormhole powers bridges. But what Wormhole really is this base messaging protocol that has like 7 products built on top of it. And so NTT is one. That's our multi-chain issuance. You probably are familiar with maybe a Paxos or an Archax or all these kind of like token or asset issuers out there. I know M0 is another one. Sometimes NTT, I just think about it as a multi-chain asset issuance protocol, open source, et cetera. And then we have multi-gov, right? So if you have this asset across all these chains, you also want to be able to vote with it or do things with it. And so we offer that tool as well. And then we have about six or 7 of these. And so NTT in particular, and we talked about it a little bit, is I would argue is a future-proof asset issuance standard, right? You can have any stablecoin, one version across all these different chains and configure it however you want. And I think Jack talked a little bit about this too. Like you can make it compliant. You can say, hey, we want KYC. If you own the contracts, you can do what you want. And so I think all of these things coupled together ultimately help us solve what I think is a really annoying thing we hear a lot, but everyone kind of complains about the UX in crypto. UX, it's almost just like a buzzword now. I'd argue anyone working on things within the space of interoperability, not just Wormhole, is ultimately solving that UX problem. But a lot of it starts with assets, making sure assets can be native and seamlessly transferred everywhere.
Amazing. We're coming close on time. I wanted to ask one last question. Regulatory clarity is becoming mission critical, of course. As RUSD scales more across more chains and more use cases, how is Ripple thinking about compliance and alignment with global regulatory frameworks?
It's a big question in a short period of time. We chose the path of being compliant, and there was another option of being non-compliant. We walked through the compliance door, if you will. So everything we do has an eye towards compliance. As I mentioned, here in the US, we're regulated by New York Department of Financial Services. We've got other licenses either pending or awarded that allows us to operate in other jurisdictions outside the US. We've got the Genius Bill and potentially the Stable Bill at the federal level, which I think is going to be a huge unlock for stablecoin adoption here in the US. If I had a magic wish list, it would be around global harmonization, because how stablecoin issuance is treated in the US doesn't necessarily comport with other jurisdictions around the world. And if you think about the possibility of a global stablecoin and in a borderless sort of way, having some level of harmonization would be ideal. So we monitor this space quite acutely. We've got a tremendous policy team around the world that's watching this. I think there's going to be some guidance coming out of the European Commission here soon, which will hopefully provide some clarity around what needs to happen in the EEA to issue a stable coin there. And so I would just say, watch this space. It's developing quickly. It's certainly turned from a headwind to a tailwind, which is very exciting for the industry. And it's something that, as I said, we're going to go the compliant route and leverage that to the extent we can.
Amazing. Well, that's all the time we have today. Thank you, both of you, for the great insights, and congratulations on your collaboration.